attacks. The market in the district Orgun was packed at the time with people shopping for the Muslim festival of Ramadan. The BBC's Karen Allen in Kabul. Congress hears from Federal Reserve Chair Janet Yellen today. NPR's John Itzty says Yellen will be giving her latest outlook on the U.S. economy and on interest rates.
Some analysts think Yellen may be more open about when the Fed will begin raising its benchmark interest rate because of recent positive economic data, like the stronger-than-expected employment report earlier this month. Already, the Fed is gradually shrinking its bond-buying stimulus program and is expected to end it this fall. But in a just-published New Yorker article, Yellen reiterates her concern about high unemployment and her view that even after the economy gets back on track, interest rates should remain unusually low for a while. John Itzty, NPR News, Washington.
California officials will consider today whether to start imposing $500 fines on people who waste water. The state is dealing with a crippling drought. Officials are reviewing rules banning excessive use of water. California's Water Resources Control Board estimates the rules could save water for about 3.5 million people every year. You're listening to NPR. A subway train derailed in Moscow today, killing at least 12 people and wounding at least 120 others. Officials say several subway cars left the tracks. The Russian Emergencies Ministry says that it is looking into the cause of the accident. Initial reports suggest a power surge caused the train to stall, leading to the derailment. All passengers have apparently been taken from the subway train. The North Texas city of Denton is aiming to stop hydraulic fracturing. The city council will consider an ordinance today that could make theirs the first city in Texas to permanently ban fracking. From member station KERA, Lauren Silverman reports.
The city of Denton sits above the Barnett Shale, one of the country's largest natural gas fields. There are already nearly 300 active gas wells. But concerned citizens filed a petition in May with nearly 2,000 signatures, forcing a vote on the city council whether to ban fracking. Resident Kathy McMullen, who helped organize the initiative.
I mean, it's hard being the first, and what's making it particularly hard for us is that the fracking is there. We're trying to get it out.
If Denton doesn't approve the ban Tuesday night, it will go to voters in the November ballot. For NPR News, I'm Lauren Silverman in Dallas.
President Obama is talking up the nation's infrastructure today. He'll visit a federal highway research center in Virginia, and on Thursday he'll visit another site in Delaware to talk about increasing private investment in U.S. infrastructure. Obama is speaking more urgently on the matter, as money will soon dry up for the National Highway Trust Fund. It finances infrastructure projects around the U.S., such as roads and bridges. I'm Corbin Coleman, NPR News in Washington.
Support for NPR comes from the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, committed to building a more just, verdant, and peaceful world. More information at macfound.org.
This is WAMU 88.5's Morning Edition. It's Tuesday, July 15th, 2014. Good morning. I'm Matt McCleskey. It's 78 degrees now in Northwest D.C. It's 7:06. And it's time for an update on traffic from Jerry Edwards. How's it looking, Jerry?
Matt, for the first 2, 3, 4 hours, opening things were nice and quiet and smooth, and then we got very busy. Start with the Beltway crash. Inner loop of the Beltway. As you get up toward Braddock Road, authorities have been dealing with a collision there. As it stands right now, the left lane of the express lanes remains blocked. All regular lanes are open, so right now, I recommend you stay with the regular lanes because it looks like Fairfax Fire is going to be out there for a few more minutes. Regular lanes open, left lane of the 2 of the express lanes is still blocked. 395 northbound had the accident before you get to the 14th Street Bridge, right in the middle of the roadway. Another collision, 95 northbound in Dale City. You'd have to stay to the right to get by that. Maryland, 95 southbound near Route 198. Authorities are checking reported debris in the roadway. Matt?
Thanks, Jerry. Just ahead, we'll get a look at today's weather. First in the news, a sheriff from Maryland, known for his tough stance on illegal immigration, is visiting the U.S.-Mexico border this week to get a first-hand look at the influx of unaccompanied children entering the United States. Armando Trul has more.
Frederick County Sheriff Chuck Jenkins is joining sheriffs from 5 other counties across the nation this week on a fact-finding mission to the U.S.-Mexico border. The trip is sponsored by the Federation for American Immigration Reform. The Washington-based group advocates a temporary moratorium on almost all immigration until America develops a comprehensive immigration reform strategy. The group is also behind tough anti-illegal immigrant laws. Jenkins management, Frederick County deputies have been trained to check the immigration status of people they arrest. The Republican sheriff has pushed for a state law that will require local police to question the immigration status of people they suspect may be here illegally. Last year, a federal appeals court ruled that Jenkins and the county were guilty of violating the civil rights of an undocumented immigrant. The ruling found that 2 deputies unreasonably searched, seized, and arrested the woman while she sat in a supermarket parking lot during her lunch break. The Supreme Court refused to hear Jenkins' appeal. I'm Armando True.
The trade group representing hospitals in Virginia is reporting that it spent hundreds of thousands of dollars more on lobbying this year as it advocated to expand Medicaid. Jessica Jordan has details.
The Virginia Hospital and Healthcare Association has reported spending $400,000 for leading efforts to expand federally financed health insurance for low-income residents during this year's legislative session in Richmond. The numbers come from the group's annual lobbying disclosure filed with the state. The form covered spending from May of last year to April of this year. The $400,000 is a large increase from the year before, when the association reported spending only $93,000. Specifically this session, $100,000 of the money was spent on compensation for in-house and contract lobbyists. $11,000 went towards entertainment, and $270,000 was spent on communications. State Republicans have so far successfully blocked any Medicaid expansion. I'm Jessica Jordan.
Our weather today, mostly cloudy skies, some patchy fog here and there this morning. It's kind of hot and humid already. It's going to be very hot this afternoon, highs in the upper 80s. There's a chance we'll have some showers by late morning. As we get into the afternoon, showers and thunderstorms are likely, an 80% chance. Some of those storms could bring some strong winds and maybe some locally heavy rainfall. It's 17.
Support for WAMU 88.5 comes from the City Open, a Capital tennis tradition. The tournament, July 26th through August 3rd, benefits the Washington Tennis and Education Foundation. Ticket information at cityopentennis.com. And from General Dynamics Information Technology, dedicated to providing IT solutions that meet the challenges of a new era in healthcare. General Dynamics IT. gdit.com/health.
It's Morning Edition from NPR News. I'm Steve Inskeep.
And I'm Renee Montagne. Israel says it has accepted a ceasefire proposal in its fight with Hamas. The proposal was put forward by neighboring Egypt, and after accepting, Israel says its operations are on hold. It's still not clear as what Hamas will do. According to the Israeli military, dozens of rockets have been fired from Gaza into Israel. A short time ago, NPR reached a top Hamas official. He said Hamas leaders were negotiating among themselves what to do and said to call back, as he put it, in a couple of days. We reached NPR's Emily Harris, who is in Gaza's largest hospital, where many of the casualties are being treated and where Hamas officials often show up to speak to reporters. Good morning.
Good morning, Renee.
And what is Hamas saying exactly about why it is rejecting or at least not accepting this peace process?
Hamas' position does seem somewhat in flux. There are a lot of signs that point to Hamas not accepting this ceasefire proposal from Egypt. The military wing, Al-Qassam, put out a statement early this morning saying that accepting a ceasefire now would be basically surrender. Spokespeople for Hamas this morning are saying the same thing. But there are some things that appear to be in flux. For example, the number 2 Hamas leader outside of Gaza has put out on his Twitter feed a note that Hamas has not yet declared its official position on any ceasefire. Hamas is focusing on getting something they want out of the ceasefire, not just quitting because Israel says it's time to stop fighting.
And what does Hamas want?
Well, Hamas wants a better life in the Gaza Strip. Gaza sent Hamas power in 2007. Gaza has been increasingly cut off from the world. Israel has restrictions on travel from Gaza and restrictions on what comes in and out of Gaza, particularly restricted construction material, which really hinders the economy in Gaza. For years, a lot of this stuff came through the tunnels from Egypt along with weapons. But the new government in Egypt closed those tunnels over the past year. That deprived Hamas of a lot of tax revenue. It made the economic situation in Gaza much more difficult for Hamas to pay salaries. And so Hamas wants, they're very much focused in their statements around this possible ceasefire, resumption of normal life in the Gaza Strip, an end to siege, they say, and letting goods and people travel in and out. That could be through Egypt, doesn't necessarily have to be through Israel, but that's what they're focused on.
And then power in the Gaza Strip, is it fully under Hamas's control?
One big question is who is going to be in control in Gaza after this flare-up, this escalation, this violence of the past week ends. Hamas formally gave up power in the Gaza Strip. They left the government. They don't hold the prime ministership in the Gaza Strip. They don't hold the ministries in the Gaza Strip anymore. They handed that over to a government that was approved by Hamas and Fatah, the ruling party in the West Bank. But Mahmoud Abbas, the head of Fatah and the ruler of the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank, has very little traction here. And there's a widespread feeling that he and his government Ramallah hasn't done enough steps up to support people in Gaza in this past week of fighting. It also Abbas' government didn't come in to pay salaries of people in Gaza that Hamas couldn't pay before and after they left the government. So who's going to be in control in Gaza is a very, very good question.
We should say we're speaking to Emily Harris in Gaza City on a phone line, not a phone line. Emily, what will Israel do if the rocket fire continues?
Well, Israel says that if rocket fire continues, then they will also continue. They will resume their operations. This morning, after Israel stopped its military operations in Gaza, announced the stop to its military operations in Gaza. In the past, these fires haven't taken hold immediately. There has been in 2012, for example, last time this happened. There was some back and forth exchange, so even fire this morning doesn't necessarily mean that a ceasefire won't come through.
Emily, thanks very much. Here's Emily Harris speaking to us from Gaza.
Hamas rockets were bound for Tel Aviv yesterday when we reached Edgar Corrett, who's a novelist. 2 minutes before we got him on the phone, he heard a warning of the latest attack.
It's an air raid siren, and I even have an app for that on my phone.
You have an app for that? So,
yeah.
Do you get a sound of a siren on your phone?
Yes. My son rapidly tries to find a way to activate it when there are no alarms, but it's child-proof.
Edgar Corrett was able to chuckle about this, though he also thought of where his family was just then. At that moment, his 8-year-old was at the mall with a relative. His wife was at an event to remember Palestinian Dad. Even though Tel Aviv is under attack, many people there are thinking of the civilians killed in Gaza.
Well, it's very simple. Many of the people being killed in Gaza are not Hamas militants. They're collateral damage. Hamas many times they hide weapons or attack from populated areas, and the idea is trying to win. If Hamas may kill many of children, have been exposed, and actually in this very unique situation in which the Iron Dome so far has successfully blocked the rocket attack. Some people in Israel think that if we are not in danger right now, then this doesn't seem the right action to take.
I'd like to mention your writing in the LA Times this week about this, and you mentioned a distinction that you see in Israeli culture or in dialogue right now.
In a quarter of a mile, turn right, then turn left.
What's the distinction?
Well, if you talk to everybody in Israel, the most militant, extreme, Islamic, right-wing people, or the most radical anti-Zionists, leftists, they all say to you that you really want peace. But the thing is that most of the people yearn for peace without giving anything in return. It's kind of a peace on earth kind of thing. You pray to God and you give peace. But if you finish this work for compromise, when you say it, you have to acknowledge the fact that it's an agreement that you have to reach with somebody else, and that it's an agreement that you have to pay something for. So I would want to differentiate between people who seek peace and people who seek compromise, because the number of people here who seek peace don't want any compromise. They want peace with God, not with the Palestinians.
Earlier this week on this program, we heard from a Palestinian writer, Anania Shipley, in Ramallah, and asked her how she thought that this long-running conflict has affected Palestinians.
Turn right on M Street Northwest, then turn left on Francis Scott Key Bridge. Red light camera reported ahead.
Conflict has been affecting Israelis.
I really feel that many of the young people that I know are just kind of closing down in these kind of stories that they're telling themselves. Many times about the impossibility of peace, about the nature of Palestinians who do not seek that peace or who never keep it, And this is very depressing, I'm old enough to live in a time even before the first Intifada, and we've had the Palestinian there are such operations and attacks, I find it impossible to write fiction, you know. And to be honest, I love writing fiction and I hate writing non-fiction. I really hate writing op-eds. But you know, when there are people dying and missiles exploding about your head or even more about your child's head, I cannot sit down at the computer and make up a story of a guy that never existed. I have too many urgent things that I have to address.
Well, Andrew Carrette, thank you very much for taking the time.
Thank you.
He's an Israeli writer in Tel Aviv.
You're listening to Morning Edition on WAMU 88.5. Good morning. I'm Nat McCleskey. It's 78 degrees in Northwest Washington. It's 7:19, and it's time to get the latest look now at our Tuesday commute from Jerry. Good morning, Jerry.
Back morning on 395 northbound as you head on up toward, looks like it's going to be right around north of Duke Street at Seminary Road. And as it reports, a broken down vehicle and north of the roadway should be out to be left. The accident with the 14th Street Bridge has cleared, but we're still looking at some sidewalk delays headed to and across the 14th Street Bridge. Now, southbound goes about the tire tread. John had pulled in on the approaching Eisenhower Avenue. Now traffic is really jamming up, so we may have yet an additional issue on top of that. Dealing with the crash on the Beltway, Virginia inner loop at Braddock Road. Police were dealing with that. At last look, the through lanes were open, but the express lanes were still partially tied. Matt?
Thanks, Jerry. Well, our weather today, mostly cloudy skies expected through the day. Some patchy fog here and there this morning. It's going to be hot and humid. Already at 78 in northwest D.C. There's a chance of some showers developing later this morning. As we get into the afternoon, it's likely we'll have showers and thunderstorms developing. Highs today will be in the upper 80s. There's a chance some of the storms later today will bring strong winds, maybe some hail, and some locally heavy rainfall possible at other times. Thunder showers, storms likely into the evening as well. Overnight, we should start to clear out, though. And tomorrow, it's going to be less humid, partly cloudy, and cooler, with highs likely in the low 80s.
Support for WAMU 88.5 comes from Pepco's Energy Savings Program, providing business customers with assistance for operations and maintenance training to help keep buildings in Maryland running in an energy-efficient manner. More at pepco.com/business. And from Nationwide Insurance, auto, home, life. Rockville Nationwide Insurance agent Don McCullough can provide information on the benefits of bundling your insurance policies with one company.
At 10 today on the Diane Rehm Show, soaring natural gas production, new pipelines, and private property rights. That's the Diane Rehm Show starting at 10. It's 7:21.
This is the sound of Obsession. Obsession is a Cuban hip-hop duo. They invited our colleague David Green for a visit when he was in Havana a few weeks ago.
Their names are Magia Lopez and Alexei Rodriguez, but they told us through our interpreter that they usually go by their nicknames.
Nosotros somos Obsesión, ella es Magia, yo soy tipo pero me llaman así.
Her name is Magia, and he is este tipo.
El tipo este.
El tipo este, which means this dude.
Magic and this dude
Yeah.
are the rapper group Obsession.
Yeah.
I like that.
Ahí está.
Magic and this dude sing about social justice, fighting inequality, racism, sexism. In this song, they're asking why Cubans have forgotten their revolution, which brought socialism to the island 6 decades ago and aimed to make society more equal. We went to visit Obsession to help answer one of the big questions we brought to Cuba. What does change mean in a society where change has been such a buzzword? These artists say, for one thing, the world is learning more about Cuba, and vice versa. Even though the island is just 90 miles from Florida, it was long isolated. Rodriguez remembers the 1990s when the government frowned on hip-hop, which made its way to Cuba on cassette tapes.
Se veía el movimiento como algo.
It would seem like something that came from the U.S. So if it comes from the U.S., it must be bad.
Today, Cubans are listening to music from around the world. Few people have access to the internet, but people do get MP3s from friends, or they can take thumb drives to black market businesses and fill up on music. But Cubans are also much more free to travel these days. Obsession has been around Latin America and to the U.S.
Se da mucho los intercambios hacia acá. Before, we used to get all our information from, like, the exchange was a one-way street. It was people who would come to Cuba, Venezuelans, Mexicans, Chileans, some Spaniards, but that it wasn't us going there. And now that has changed.
So those are the voices of two musicians in Havana. Here is another Cuban artist who is seeing the same thing.
I always said the moment to be in Cuba, it's now. There is more and more interchange between Cuban and abroad. There is more and more Cuban going outside, bringing new ideas.
That's the visual artist known as Candelario. He goes by just that one name. He has an art collective that works with neighbors to improve life in their crowded community outside Havana. Candelario came to Miami for an exhibition recently and stopped by at a studio to chat along with the curator of the exhibition, Elizabeth Serrajino. Elizabeth is part of Florida's Cuban-American community, which has for years been hostile to the Castro regime, feeling that it's repressive and backwards. Now she visits her relatives in Cuba frequently, and she's trying to build bridges between Cuban and Cuban-American artists. But as you're about to hear, connections between Cubans and Cuban-Americans can be complicated.
There are many instances when I travel to Cuba that I do not go visit my family, and I do that purposely because they don't understand this idea that perhaps, Elizabeth wants to engage with Cuba and with Cubans on a very different level outside of that exile Cuba narrative. I think we've had 50 years of that, and that conversation needs to change.
And there was one other voice in the room, a Cuban-American artist, Leighton Rodriguez.
It always seems like the distance between Miami and Havana have always been so far. And they're just so close, not just in distance, but in culture.
Leighton's trying to eliminate that distance. He plans to show his own work at an exhibition of Cuban-American artists in Havana soon. Candelario, Elizabeth, and Leighton each have views of Cuba shaped by different pasts. Leighton told us how his parents escaped Cuba with him as a boy on the Mariel boat lift in 1980.
For my parents, the difficulties were just day-to-day. The ability to find food, just a constant daily exchange and trade and bartering system of how to find milk. And from my side of the family,
500 feet. Turn left on North Washington Boulevard.
Basic supplies to family. It seems to be very much
Turn left on North Washington Boulevard.
There, as it is here, in terms of poverty versus affluence. The stories that my family's bringing back are working class people that are having a really tough time there. And it's interesting how, at least the ideology of the revolution was sort of to do away with that.
Candelario, can I just ask you one question about what Leighton just said? His parents, 34 years ago, struggled to find milk. Is that the reality for some families in Cuba still today?
No, absolutely not. This is funny because I have a few friends that have to do the same thing, and I promise them you can find everything you want. Mm-hmm. It's true that sometimes when you want to buy a special thing, for sure it's difficult to find it. But the rest, milk or meat or whatever, is there every day.
If you have the money to buy it.
Yeah, I mean, that's
how do you get that money?
Yeah, but this is $40 in the life. I mean, that's the problem. That's another thing.
Yeah,
I don't want to talk about money. I'm just talking about possibilities.
Right, but I don't think you can divorce the question from the broader socio-political environment, which is that most people who make $20 a month cannot go and buy milk. Yes, it's in the market, but if that bottle of milk is $5, that's 1/5 of your salary.
I agree, but what if you have money and then there is nothing to buy? That's why I'm trying to speak, to answer the question really. Now, you are in Havana and you go to one direction, there is a huge supermarket, there is another agro, I do not say that, I mean...
Like a farmer's market.
Now, let's talk about money. Okay, with your salary, you cannot, but hello, there is Cuban with $20 salary, but they have an Audi car that come from, I don't know, I mean, I want to wonder.
Relatives from the United
United States.
Yeah, could be. Not just from the United States, but from abroad, yes.
Artists will often tell you that you can see different things in the same image, and maybe the same can be said for Cuba. These three seem to interpret what's happening on the island differently, but they acknowledge the same reality. While there's been progress, the portrait of Cuba remains largely unchanged. People are struggling to find their place in a society where there's quality public education and health care, but where the price of a bottle of milk can trigger a debate about the future.
In Cuba, people adapt to the situation they had, and they try to survive. I mean, in a way, using a lot of jokes.
Mm-hmm.
That's why the reason I've always said that Cuba is the best place to be a child, and then to